The signal from Kepler 442b, the bridge of the exploration vessel. Nebula's edge hummed with tension as Captain Nira Valdris studied the holographic display floating before her command chair. Her purple scales rippled with barely contained excitement, catching the blue light of the star charts. The signal they'd been tracking for 3 months was stronger now, pulsing with mathematical precision from the infamous Deathworld designated Kepler 442b. "Captain," Dr. Jorik Hem called from his station, his crystalline features refracting the bridge lights as he turned toward her. "I must again advise against this course of action. No expedition to Kepler 442b has ever returned intact. The electromagnetic storms alone will be manageable with proper shielding," Valdris interrupted, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd navigated the galaxy's darker corners for 2 decades. "Besides, Doctor, isn't scientific curiosity what drives your species? These energy patterns are unlike anything in our databases." At the communications console, Tess Corvin's fingers danced across the control surface with practiced ease. Her brown hair fell across her face as she leaned forward, studying the incoming data streams. Something about the signal's structure made her pulse quicken in a way she couldn't explain. The mathematical sequences embedded within the transmission felt almost familiar. "The signal's definitely artificial," she reported, glancing up to meet the captain's reptilian gaze. "But there's something strange about its construction. The base mathematics are advanced, but they follow principles that predate most known civilizations." Xander Thorne looked up from the engineering station where he'd been running diagnostics on their atmospheric processors. His dark eyes met Tess's across the bridge, and she felt that familiar flutter in her chest that had been growing stronger over the past few weeks of working closely together. "The ship can handle the atmospheric pressures," he said, his voice steady and reassuring. "I've reinforced the hull integrity fields and upgraded our environmental suits. We'll be as safe as possible down there." Valdris nodded approvingly. Having humans aboard her crew had proven invaluable. Their species' peculiar combination of recklessness and ingenuity made them excellent explorers, even if their recent emergence onto the galactic stage meant they lacked the healthy fear that older species had developed for places like Kepler 442b. "Dr. Hem, what do our historical archives tell us about this system?" the captain asked. The Corellian scholar's translucent fingers rippled as he accessed the ship's databases. "Very little, I'm afraid. The system was surveyed roughly 800 years ago and immediately classified as uninhabitable. Class 15 Deathworld designation. The gravitational anomalies, toxic atmosphere, and constant storm systems make it unsuitable for any known form of life. Yet something down there is broadcasting a signal sophisticated enough to reach us across 3 star systems," Tess observed, her brow furrowed in concentration. She'd run the transmission through every decryption algorithm she knew, but something about it remained tantalizingly out of reach. Xander moved closer to her station, ostensibly to check the power distribution readings, but Tess was acutely aware of his presence beside her. Their shoulders almost touched as he leaned over her console. "Maybe it's not trying to communicate," he suggested quietly, his breath warm near her ear. "Maybe it's more like a beacon, something waiting to be found." The thought sent an unexpected chill down Tess's spine. She turned slightly, finding herself looking into Xander's concerned brown eyes. There was something protective in his gaze that made her heart race, though she tried to maintain her professional composure. "Beacon or communication attempt," Valdris announced, rising from her command chair. "We're going to investigate. Prepare the ship for descent, Mr. Thorne. Dr. Hem, ready the scientific equipment. Ms. Corvin, keep monitoring that signal. I want to know the moment anything changes." As the crew moved to execute their orders, Tess felt Xander's hand briefly touch her shoulder, a gesture of reassurance that sent warmth through her, despite the growing sense of unease about their destination. "Hey," he said softly, his voice meant only for her. "Whatever's down there, we'll figure it out together, okay?" She nodded, managing a small smile. "Together," she agreed, though something deep inside her whispered that whatever they found on Kepler 442b would change everything, not just for their mission, but for the entire galaxy's understanding of its own history. The ship's engines roared to life as they began their descent toward the storm-shrouded world below, carrying them toward a discovery that would shatter everything they thought they knew about humanity's place among the stars. Descent into darkness. The atmospheric entry was violent beyond anything the crew had experienced. Lightning cracked across the viewports in sheets of purple fire, while Kepler 442b's gravity wells tossed the nebula's edge like a child's toy. Captain Valdris gripped her command chair as the ship bucked and rolled through the turbulent descent. "Hull integrity at 87% and dropping," Xander called out, his hands flying over the engineering controls. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he rerouted power to the structural fields. "These gravitational shears are incredible. It's like the planet itself is trying to tear us apart." At her station, Tess fought to maintain the communication link while the ship pitched violently around them. The signal from the surface was growing stronger, more insistent, as if responding to their approach. Strange harmonics threaded through the transmission, creating patterns that made her head throb with half-remembered melodies. "The signal's changing," she reported, her voice strained. "It's becoming more complex, almost like—" She paused, struggling to find the right words. "Like it's trying to guide us somewhere specific." Dr. Hem looked up from his geological scanners, his crystalline features pale with worry. "Captain, the storm patterns below are unlike anything in our meteorological databases. The electromagnetic disturbances alone should prevent any form of electronic communication. Yet this signal is cutting through as if the interference doesn't exist." A particularly violent jolt threw Tess from her chair. Before she could hit the deck, Xander's strong arms caught her, pulling her against his chest. For a moment, they stayed frozen like that, her hands pressed against his shirt, feeling his heart racing beneath her palms. "I've got you," he murmured, his voice rough with concern. Their eyes met, and Tess felt something shift between them. A deeper connection forged in the crucible of shared danger. "Thank you," she whispered, reluctantly pulling away as another tremor shook the ship. "Landing site acquired," Valdris announced, her reptilian features set with determination. "Mr. Thorne, can you get us down in one piece?" "Already working on it," he replied, though his eyes lingered on Tess with obvious worry. "There's a sheltered valley about 2 kilometers from the signal's origin point. The ground looks stable enough to support our weight." The landing was rough but successful. Through the viewports, they could see Kepler 442b's hellish landscape. Twisted rock formations reached toward the storm-dark sky like grasping claws, while rivers of some phosphorescent liquid carved glowing channels through the barren terrain. "Environmental suits, everyone," Valdris ordered. "Full protection protocols." As they suited up in the airlock, Xander helped Tess with her helmet seals, his hands gentle but thorough as he checked each connection. The intimate gesture wasn't lost on either of them, and Tess found herself leaning into his touch despite the bulky suits between them. "Stay close to me out there," he said quietly, activating her suit's communication system. "This place gives me a bad feeling." "I will," she promised, surprised by how much his protection meant to her. The surface was worse than their scans had indicated. The wind howled with voices that seemed almost human, and the ground beneath their feet pulsed with a rhythm disturbingly similar to a heartbeat. Dr. Hem's instruments went wild as they approached the signal's source. "The electromagnetic readings are off the scale," he reported through their helmet comms. "But there's something else. Metallic structures buried approximately 15 meters below the surface. The configuration is, unusual." They crested a ridge, and the sight below made them all freeze. What had appeared to be natural rock formations on their scans was clearly artificial. Massive geometric shapes rising from the ground like the bones of some titanic structure. And carved into the nearest surface, barely visible beneath centuries of accumulated debris, were symbols. Tess stumbled forward as if drawn by an invisible force, Xander close behind her. She knelt beside the carved stone, brushing away the accumulated grime with trembling hands. The symbols revealed themselves gradually, and when she saw them clearly, her blood turned to ice. "No," she breathed, her voice barely audible over the comm system. "This can't be right. What is it?" Valdris demanded, moving closer. "What do you see?" Tess looked up at her crewmates, her face pale behind her helmet visor. "These aren't alien symbols," she said, her voice shaking. "They're human, ancient human writing, but that's impossible. Humans have only been spacefaring for 3 centuries. This site is thousands of years old." Dr. Hem's scanner beeped frantically as he swept it over the carved surface. "The carbon dating confirms it," he said, his scholarly composure cracking. These markings predate human space travel by millennia. Either our dating methods are completely wrong, or the official histories are incomplete, Valdris finished grimly, her reptilian eyes narrowing as she studied the two humans in her crew with new suspicion. The signal from below grew stronger, more urgent, as if the buried structure sensed their discovery. Somewhere in the depths beneath their feet, ancient systems were awakening, responding to the presence of the very species that had created them so long ago. The awakening chamber. The entrance to the buried structure revealed itself as the ancient mechanisms responded to Tess's touch. Massive stone slabs, each weighing several tons, slid apart with barely a whisper, revealing a corridor that stretched into darkness beyond their light's reach. The power source is still active after all these centuries, Dr. Hem observed, his voice filled with academic wonder despite the obvious danger. The engineering required to maintain such systems is beyond anything in our current understanding. Captain Valdris drew her sidearm, her scales shifting to a darker shade that Xander recognized as a sign of extreme caution. We proceed carefully. Whatever civilization built this may have left automated defenses. As they descended into the structure, bioluminescent strips along the walls began to glow, casting an eerie blue light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with Tess's heartbeat. She found herself walking slightly ahead of the group, drawn by an instinct she couldn't name. "Tess," Xander called softly, catching her arm gently. "Wait for us. We should stay together." She turned to look at him and he saw something strange in her eyes. A distant look, as if she was seeing things that weren't there. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. "Hear what?" he asked, though he kept his voice low and soothing, sensing her distress. "The humming, like voices singing in a language I should understand but don't." Dr. Hem's scanner chirped with new readings. "Fascinating. The neural frequency emanations in this area are extremely complex. It's possible the structure itself is designed to interact with specific brainwave patterns." They reached a vast chamber whose ceiling disappeared into shadows above. Row upon row of cylindrical pods lined the walls, each filled with a translucent blue fluid that sparkled with its own inner light. And floating within each pod, "By the void," Valdris breathed, her weapon trembling in her grip. "They're human." Hundreds of preservation chambers stretched away into the darkness, each containing a perfectly preserved human figure. They wore armor unlike anything in current military designs, sleek, organic-looking suits that seemed to pulse with contained energy. Their faces were serene as if they were merely sleeping. Tess approached the nearest pod, her hand outstretched as if guided by invisible strings. The moment her gloved fingers touched the surface, the chamber flared with light, and images flooded her mind with devastating clarity. She saw starships the size of cities, their hulls bristling with weapons that could crack planets. She saw human soldiers standing over the ruins of civilizations, their faces hard with victory. She saw herself, but not herself, a woman who looked exactly like her, standing in a throne room while alien dignitaries bowed before her. "Tess!" Xander's voice seemed to come from very far away. She felt his arms around her as her knees buckled, the visions overwhelming her senses. "What's happening to her?" Through the chaos in her mind, she heard another voice, ancient, mechanical, but unmistakably human in its inflections. "Welcome home, daughter of the bloodline. You have returned at last." A holographic projection materialized in the center of the chamber, taking the form of an elderly human woman in elaborate robes. Her eyes were kind, but carried the weight of millennia. "I am Oracle," the projection announced, her voice echoing through the chamber. "Guardian of the Terran Colonial Archive. I have waited 873 years for one of the bloodline to return." Valdris kept her weapon trained on the hologram, though she knew it would be useless. "What bloodline? What is this place?" Oracle's attention fixed on Tess, who was still trembling in Xander's protective embrace. "She carries the genetic markers of the Corvin administrative dynasty. Her ancestors ruled 17 star systems before the Great Exile." "That's impossible," Xander said fiercely, holding Tess closer. "Humanity has only been in space for 3 centuries. We're barely past our own solar system." The hologram's expression grew sad, so they succeeded in their deception. "Tell me, young ones, what do your history books say about humanity's first contact with alien life?" Dr. Hem cleared his throat nervously. "First contact was established with the Zephyrian Republic in 2387, approximately 238 years ago. Humanity was welcomed into the Galactic Council as a junior member species. Lies, Oracle said simply. Humanity ruled the Outer Rim for over 1,000 years. We built an empire that stretched across 47 systems. We tamed Deathworlds, conquered hostile alien species, and brought order to the chaos of deep space. The hologram gestured to the preservation chambers around them. These are the Colonial Guard, the finest warriors humanity ever produced, placed in stasis before the betrayal. Tess finally found her voice, though it came out as barely a whisper.
What betrayal?
The Coalition, Oracle replied, her image flickering with what seemed like anger. 7 alien species, united by their fear of human expansion. They struck simultaneously, using weapons designed to target human DNA. Entire worlds died in minutes. Those who survived were driven to the edges of known space, their memories altered, their histories rewritten. Captain Valdris lowered her weapon slightly, her analytical mind working through the implications. If this is true, why maintain the deception for so long? Because, Oracle said, turning to face the Zephyrian captain directly. They know that if humanity ever remembers what it once was, what it's truly capable of, no force in the galaxy could stop them from reclaiming their rightful place among the stars. In the depths of the chamber, several preservation pods began to glow more brightly. After 8 centuries of slumber, the Colonial Guard was beginning to stir, responding to the presence of their long-lost heir. Tess felt Xander's arms tighten around her protectively, and she realized that whatever choice she made next would determine not just their fate, but the destiny of every living being in the galaxy. Sins of the past. The first preservation chamber cracked open with a hiss of escaping gases. The blue fluid drained away, revealing the occupant in all his imposing glory. Commander Victor Rashid stood nearly 2 meters tall, his dark skin unmarked by time, his eyes sharp with the clarity of someone who had simply closed his eyes moments ago rather than sleeping for 8 centuries. His armor powered up automatically, systems that had lain dormant humming to life with quiet efficiency. When he stepped from the pod, water streaming from his massive frame, his presence seemed to fill the chamber with barely contained power. "Oracle," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to absolute command. "Status report. The bloodline has returned, Commander," the AI replied. "Lady Corvin's descendant stands before you, though she knows nothing of her heritage." Victor's gaze settled on Tess, who instinctively moved closer to Xander's protective presence. The ancient warrior studied her with calculating eyes as if measuring her worth. "She's weak," he pronounced finally. "Soft. The bloodline has been diluted by centuries of peaceful living." "Hey!" Xander stepped forward, his hands clenched into fists, despite the obvious futility of challenging an armored super soldier. "She's not weak. She's the strongest person I know." Victor's attention shifted to Xander with something resembling amusement. "And you would be?" "Xander Thorne." "I'm her." He paused, suddenly unsure of how to define their relationship. "I'm with her. A protector." Victor nodded approvingly. "Good. She'll need one for what's coming." He turned back to Oracle. "How many ships remain operational?" 17 dreadnoughts in various hidden locations throughout the galaxy, Oracle reported, each with a full complement of Colonial Guard in stasis. The Terran Resurrection Protocol remains viable. Captain Valdris had remained silent during this exchange, but now she spoke up, her voice tight with barely controlled fear. "You're talking about war, about conquering the galaxy." Victor's laugh was cold and bitter. "Reconquering, Captain. We built this civilization once. We brought order to chaos, peace to warring systems. And how were we repaid? Betrayal, genocide, our children raised as servants to those who murdered their ancestors." More pods were opening now, revealing other members of the Colonial Guard. Each warrior was a masterpiece of genetic enhancement and military training, their armor bearing the scars of battles fought across distant stars. They moved with fluid precision, weapons materializing in their hands as if summoned from nowhere. Dr. Hem backed against the wall, his scanner forgotten in his trembling hands. "The genetic modifications alone. They're beyond anything we thought possible. Each one is essentially a living weapon." "We had to be," Victor said, his voice carrying the weight of old pain. "The galaxy was not a kind place when humanity first ventured into it. Species that saw us as prey learned otherwise, or they cease to exist. Tess finally found her voice, though it shook with emotion. But the costs? Oracle showed me the memories. Entire civilizations destroyed. Billions dead. Would you prefer that those billions be human? Victor asked harshly. Because that was the choice, girl. Kill or be killed. Conquer or be enslaved. Xander moved protectively in front of Tess, his jaw set with determination. There has to be another way. The galaxy has been at peace for centuries. Why destroy that? Peace? Victor's eyes blazed with fury. You call this peace? Humanity scratching for scraps at the edges of civilization, grateful for whatever crumbs the benevolent alien species choose to share. Your own homeworld is overcrowded, poisoned, dying, while these same species maintain garden worlds they don't even inhabit. The truth of his words hit like physical blows. Earth was indeed struggling, its resources stretched thin, while humanity remained confined to a handful of marginally habitable colonies. Oracle's projection shimmered as new data streams flowed through her consciousness. Commander, I'm detecting Galactic Council ships approaching the system. They've traced our activation signal. How long? Victor demanded. Approximately 6 hours until they achieve orbit. Victor nodded grimly, then turned to Tess with an expression that mixed hope and desperate determination. Lady Corvin, the choice is yours. You can activate the Resurrection Protocol and restore humanity to its rightful place in the galaxy. Or you can return to your ship and pretend none of this ever happened, knowing that your species will slowly fade into extinction. Tess looked around the chamber at the awakening warriors, then at her crewmates. Dr. Hem cowered against the wall, clearly terrified. Captain Valdris watched with the calculating gaze of someone weighing impossible odds. And Xander looked at her with such love and trust that it broke her heart. If I refuse? She asked quietly. Then we return to stasis, Victor replied, and humanity continues its slow march toward irrelevance. But know this, the Coalition fears us for good reason. They remember what we're capable of. Even if you don't, they will never allow humanity to grow strong enough to threaten them again. Oracle materialized a holographic display showing ship movements throughout the galaxy. The Council fleet is larger than expected, Commander. They're taking no chances. Victor's smile was predatory. Good, let them come. It's time the galaxy remembered why they were so eager to forget us in the first place. But his eyes remained fixed on Tess, waiting for her decision. In her hands lay the power to reshape the galaxy, or to let sleeping legends lie forever. Beside her, Xander took her hand, his touch warm and reassuring even through their environmental suits. Whatever you choose, he whispered. I'm with you, always. The weight of 8 centuries of hidden history pressed down on her shoulders as the awakened warriors of the Colonial Guard awaited their orders. The choice of shadows. The chamber fell silent except for the quiet hum of awakening systems and the soft breathing of those who waited for Tessa's decision. She stood at the center of it all, feeling the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders like a physical force. Show me, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Show me what humanity really was. Oracle's projection expanded, filling the air around them with holographic images of the past. They saw human colonies stretching across star systems, massive space stations that dwarfed anything in the current galaxy, fleets of warships moving in perfect formation. But they also saw the darker side, alien cities burning under orbital bombardment, refugee ships fleeing desperately through space, entire species reduced to extinction. We were conquerors, Victor said, his voice heavy with both pride and regret. But we were also builders. The trade routes you use today, the hyperspace navigation protocols, the universal translation matrices, all human innovations. We dragged this galaxy out of its barbarism and gave it civilization. Captain Valdris studied the images with her tactical mind. And when they rebelled? We showed them why rebellion was futile, Victor replied grimly. Until they found a weapon we couldn't counter. Treachery on a scale we never imagined possible. More preservation chambers were opening now, revealing dozens of Colonial Guard warriors. Each one moved with lethal precision, their ancient armor adapting to current threat levels. But their eyes all turned to Tess, waiting. Xander squeezed her hand gently. You don't have to decide for everyone, he murmured. Whatever happened in the past, we can choose who we want to be now. Tess looked into his eyes, seeing the man who had protected her, who had stood by her side even when everything they thought they knew crumbled around them. In that moment, she realized that love, real, honest love, was worth more than all the empires in the galaxy. "Commander Rashid," she said, turning to face the ancient warrior. "If I activate this protocol, what happens to people like Captain Valdris? To Dr. Hem? To all the non-humans in the galaxy?" Victor's expression hardened. "They adapt to the new reality, or they face the consequences of their ancestors' crimes." "That's not good enough," Tess said firmly. And for the first time, Victor saw something in her bearing that reminded him of the nobles he had once served. "I won't be responsible for genocide, no matter what was done to us." "Then you condemn humanity to eventual extinction," Victor warned. "The Coalition will never allow us to grow strong enough to challenge them again." Oracle's voice cut through the tension. "Commander, the Council fleet has accelerated their approach. Estimated arrival, 3 hours, 47 minutes. Tess made her choice. "I'll activate the protocol," she said, ignoring Xander's sharp intake of breath. "But with conditions. The awakened ships will serve as protectors, not conquerors. They'll establish safe zones for human expansion, but they won't attack existing colonies or civilizations unless directly threatened." Victor's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You think to give me orders, girl?" "I think to give you purpose beyond revenge," she replied, surprised by her own courage. "The galaxy needs protection from real threats. Pirates, slavers, the things that prey on the weak. Let humanity be known for defending the innocent, not for conquest." For a long moment, Victor said nothing. Around them, the awakened colonial guard watched their commander with expressions of barely contained anticipation. Finally, he nodded slowly. "Perhaps. There is wisdom in that approach. Oracle, prepare the awakening signal. Limited activation. Establish defensive perimeters around human colonies and trade routes only." "What about them?" Xander asked, nodding toward Captain Valdris and Dr. Hem. "They know the truth now." Captain Valdris straightened, her scales shifting to a more neutral color. "The truth has a way of coming out eventually," she said pragmatically. "Perhaps it's better if it comes from those who can control how it's revealed." Dr. Hem nodded eagerly. "Think of the archaeological implications alone. This discovery rewrites our understanding of galactic history. It must be studied, documented properly." Oracle's projection flickered as massive systems across the galaxy responded to the awakening signal. 17 dreadnoughts coming online. Colonial Guard awakening protocols initiated. The galaxy will know that humanity has remembered its heritage. Victor moved closer to Tess, his expression softer now. "You have wisdom, Lady Corvin. Perhaps the bloodline has not been as diluted as I feared. Your ancestors would be proud." Tess felt Xander's arms encircle her from behind, his warmth anchoring her to the present. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we teach the galaxy that humanity is no longer content to remain in the shadows," Victor replied. "But we do so as protectors, not destroyers. It will be a difficult balance to maintain." The ground shook as the buried ship began to rise, centuries of accumulated soil falling away from its hull. Through the chamber's viewports, they could see other structures emerging across the planet's surface, an entire hidden fleet awakening from its long slumber. "The Council ships will arrive soon," Oracle warned. "They will not be pleased to discover what has awakened here." "Let them come," Victor said, but his smile was different now, still dangerous, but tempered with something resembling hope. "We'll show them that the new humanity is both stronger and more merciful than the old." As the ship broke free from the planet's surface and soared toward the stars, Tess leaned back against Xander's chest, watching the galaxy spread out before them. They had awakened something ancient and powerful, but they had also chosen to forge a different path forward. In the shadows between stars, 17 dreadnoughts powered up their engines and prepared to remind the galaxy that humanity's story was far from over. But this time, they would write that story not in the blood of conquered enemies, but in the deeds of protectors who had chosen love over vengeance, hope over despair. The Age of Shadows was ending. The Age of Guardians had begun,